There is a silence that haunts every crowded room, a silence behind the smile, behind the laughter, behind the perfect selfie captioned, authentic. You know the one I mean. The aching question echoing in the background. Am I enough? Yet? You scroll, you smile, you chase, you post. You wait, not for truth, but for approval. And you get it, hearts, comments, praise, tiny injections of temporary self-worth. But then, the silence returns. Here's the truth most people never dare whisper. You've mistaken attention for love. You've mistaken applause for identity. You've built your sense of self on other people's eyes. That's why you feel hollow, even after they clap. Validation feels like comfort, but it's a cage with velvet walls. It begins innocently. A compliment here, a gold star there. A little reward for being good, being nice, being acceptable. But over time, you stop being you and start becoming who they want you to be. And who are they? Sartre called them the other. He said we become objects when we're seen. We become what the gaze defines us as. Heidegger called it das Man, the anonymous collective that tells you what's normal, what's right, what's worth pursuing. Nietzsche, he had no patience for it. He called it slave morality, the herd instinct that rewards the docile and punishes the dangerous. These weren't abstract theories, they were warnings, because every time you shape yourself to be more likable, more agreeable, more seen, you lose a little more of what was once whole. Every time you wait for applause, your soul holds its breath. And let's be honest, this isn't just happening in the digital world. It's everywhere, at work, in your relationships, even in the mirror. You don't just fear being disliked, you fear being invisible, because deep down, you've tied your existence to being witnessed. But here's the twist. The more you crave their gaze, the more you disappear beneath it. So the question isn't whether you're getting enough validation. The question is far more dangerous. Who are you without it? You weren't born this way. You didn't come into this world wondering if you were good enough. You didn't check your reflection to see if you were lovable. That was taught to you, word by word, wound by wound. It began when you were a child, when affection came with performance, when love looked like approval, and approval looked like survival. Somewhere in your earliest memories, your nervous system learned a dangerous equation. I must be good to be safe. I must be liked to be loved. What you didn't realize was that you were trading your being for their permission. And from that moment on, you began building a self not from the inside out, but from the outside in. This is not weakness, this is conditioning. But here's where it gets darker. Hegel saw this centuries ago. In his Phenomenology of Spirit, he wrote about the master-slave dialectic, a deep truth about selfhood. Self-consciousness exists only in being acknowledged. We learn who we are through recognition, but when recognition is one-sided, when it comes only from above or from the crowd, it traps us. That's the psychological blueprint of validation seeking. We're trying to stabilize our shaky sense of self by borrowing the gaze of others. But, as Hegel warned, borrowed identity is never freedom, it's dependency. Then came Kierkegaard, whispering warnings from the shadows of 19th century Denmark. Despair is the sickness unto death. Despair, he said, is what happens when the self tries to be something it is not. It's the spiritual illness of trying to become the version of yourself that others will accept. Every time you pretend, every time you smile when you want to scream, every time you shape yourself to please their expectations, you're abandoning your soul to avoid their silence. But perhaps the most haunting theory came from René Girard. He believed that our desires aren't even ours. They are mimetic. We imitate what others want, not because the object has value, but because the other's attention gives it value. We desire things because others desire them. So when you seek validation, you're not just chasing approval, you're chasing the illusion of being desirable, because someone else desired you first. In this way, validation becomes a mirror game. You want to be wanted, so you become what others want and forget what you are. So let's call this what it is. Validation seeking is not innocent. It's not harmless. It's the quiet theft of your original self. And every time you reach for someone else's praise, you're pulling further away from the one thing that could set you free, your own voice. There is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path, and the path begins when the ego ends. You suffer because your ego is hungry, and not just hungry for praise, attention, likes, and love, but ravenous. The ego wants to be seen, admired, agreed with. It doesn't care if it's authentic, it just wants to be approved. But here's the catch, the ego is never satisfied. The more validation it gets, the more it craves. Because the ego doesn't feed on truth, it feeds on illusion. In early Buddhist teachings, the self is seen as an illusion. The Buddha called it a not-enoughness self. That doesn't mean you don't exist. It means the you cling to, the one performing for others, comparing, grasping, is not your true self. The ego, in Buddhist terms, is the root of suffering, dukkha. It creates separation. It creates comparison. It creates craving. Craving is the cause of suffering. Craving for existence. Craving for non-existence. Now apply that to validation. You crave to be praised, sensual. You crave to be somebody in the eyes of others, existence. You crave to avoid being nobody, non-existence. The result? A cycle of endless becoming. You're always becoming the next version of yourself, better, hotter, smarter, more likable, but never arriving. Because the ego doesn't allow peace, it only allows progress, and it measures progress through external reaction. Even Nietzsche, who never bowed to spiritual dogma, warned us about this. He said that most people live by the morality of the herd, not because it's right, but because it's safe. He who cannot command himself must obey. And that is what the herd does. The ego, like the herd, is terrified of standing alone. It would rather be validated in a lie than rejected in the truth. So you perform, you post, you conform, and slowly, piece by piece, the self dissolves under the weight of applause. Here's the paradox. The more the ego tries to protect you from rejection, the more it imprisons you in dependence. It becomes a parasite whispering, "Don't speak your truth, they won't like it. Don't be too different, they won't follow you. Don't be real, be impressive." But your essence was never meant to impress, it was meant to be. The Buddha didn't say destroy the ego. He said see through it. Realize it's just a tool, a mask, a temporary avatar. The real self, it's beneath the performance, behind the craving, under the mask. It's not loud, it's not shiny, it doesn't need praise, it just needs silence. You tell yourself it's harmless, a like here, a comment there, a tiny thrill when someone praises your post, your look, your mind. But you know it's deeper than that. This isn't about fun anymore, it's about survival, it's about identity, and it's costing you something you can't afford to lose. Every time you alter your truth to fit the room, every time you smile when you want to scream, every time you silence your instincts just to keep the peace, you're cutting a thread that connects you to yourself. Eventually, you don't even recognize your own reflection. You've become a mosaic of other people's preferences, a collage of performances. You're not living, you're auditioning for friends, for partners, for strangers, for ghosts. And deep down, you're terrified that without the act, there's nothing left. That if you stopped seeking their approval, you might disappear entirely. Jean-Paul Sartre saw this. He called it the look, that moment when another person's gaze transforms you into an object. You're no longer a being with agency, you're a reflection of what they want to see. And so you contort, you shrink, you posture, all for the illusion of acceptance. To be looked at is to be fixed, he said. And fixed things don't grow, fixed things don't breathe, fixed things just stay where they're told. Martin Heidegger had another name for it, Das Man, the they, the faceless voice of the crowd that dictates what's acceptable, what's beautiful, what's worth striving for. The they doesn't care who you are, it only cares how well you conform. And when you seek validation from the they, you vanish into the fog of the ordinary. You surrender your life to trend cycles and shallow norms. You mistake comfort for meaning. You mistake visibility for vitality. You disappear, and no one notices because everyone else is disappearing too. René Girard took it one step further. He said your desires were never yours to begin with. You want what others want. You crave what seems desirable in the eyes of another. It's a loop, a trap. Mimetic desire turns everyone into a rival, not because you hate them, but because they reflect back to you the thing you think you lack. So you chase status, you chase beauty, you chase applause, but you're never chasing from your center. You're chasing from emptiness. And the worst part? The more you chase, the more hollow you become. Praise doesn't land. Compliments don't stick. You can't hold anything because your identity was never solid to begin with. You're a leaking bucket trying to hold an ocean of other people's approval. So let's be clear, this isn't harmless. This isn't just a modern problem. This is a spiritual death. The soul doesn't die with a scream. It dies in a whisper when it's ignored long enough. And if you started to feel that inner ache, that quiet grief when the likes fade and the applause stops, good. It means the mask is cracking. It means something real wants to come through. It means you're still alive, but not for long, unless you stop performing and start listening. You won't escape by being seen. You won't be healed by being admired. You won't be free by being followed. The truth is colder. The truth is deeper, and it's been whispered by mystics, monks, and madmen for centuries. The only way out is in. We live in a world that trains you to look outward, to chase validation, to dress up your wounds for display, to post your pain for engagement. But the soul doesn't grow in noise, it grows in silence. And silence only lives in one place, inside you. The Buddha never promised comfort, he promised liberation. And liberation, he said, begins the moment you stop running from discomfort, from fear, from yourself. You, yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. But the ego doesn't believe that. The ego whispers, "I'll be worthy when they approve of me." The Buddha answers, "You'll be free when you no longer need them to." The mistake is thinking healing is something you earn through performance. But healing doesn't come from adding more. It comes from letting go. Letting go of masks, of roles, of the delusion that applause equals worth, that silence equals failure, that solitude means you're broken. This is why meditation matters, not because it's fashionable, but because it's rebellion. To sit in stillness is to confront the parts of you you've kept hidden beneath your performance, to witness the craving for validation arise and not act on it, to feel the loneliness and not drown it in noise, to finally whisper, "I see you," not to your followers, but to the forgotten child inside you. Carl Jung called it the shadow, not evil, just unseen. It's everything you were told to repress in order to be loved. Your anger, your grief, your depth, your truth. And if you do not face it, he warned, it will rule you from the dark. You'll keep performing, you'll keep chasing, you'll keep mistaking applause for peace, and hate yourself for needing it. But when you stop, when you finally turn inward, when you look at what you've buried, not with judgment but with curiosity, something begins to shift. Not a miracle, not a glow-up, but something far more sacred. Integration. You realize you don't need to be perfect to be whole. You don't need to be impressive to be real. You don't need to be understood to be true. You need to return to yourself, not the mask, but the marrow. This is not the path of the algorithm. It is the path of the soul. It is the path no one can walk for you, and it begins the moment you stop asking the world to see you and start seeing yourself, fully, naked, unedited, unafraid. That moment is not loud. It won't trend, but it's the first time you'll taste real freedom. Something strange happens when you stop asking the world to clap for you, when you stop performing, when you stop hoping to be picked, liked, retweeted, kissed, or saved. At first, it feels like death, the death of identity, the death of the image you spent years constructing. The mask crumbles, the silence gets louder, and all the noise you used to outrun finally catches up to you. But if you can stay there, if you can sit in that terrifying stillness, if you can resist the temptation to scroll, post, impress, or explain, something even stranger begins to unfold. You realize that the approval you thought you needed was just an echo, a ghost of a wound, a projection of a belief that you weren't enough without being watched. When you stop needing to be seen, you finally begin to see, not the world, not your followers, you. You begin to meet the parts of you that you had disowned, the quiet, awkward, Angry, wild, grieving, powerful, tender parts. The child, the warrior, the artist, the mystic. The one who doesn't speak in hashtags or filters. The one who doesn't need applause to know they are real. Carl Jung said, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration." This is what happens when you accept yourself. You stop exiling the parts of you that weren't lovable to others. You reclaim them. You bring them home. And in doing so, you become something terrifying to a society built on insecurity. You become whole. When you accept yourself, your pace slows. You stop rushing to prove anything. You start saying no without guilt. You don't chase friendships or lovers or praise. You don't edit your voice to make it easier to digest. You speak because there's something true inside you that demands to be expressed, not because you're trying to impress. You no longer ask the mirror, "Am I beautiful?" You ask the moment, "Am I present?" You don't count followers. You notice how it feels to finally sit in your own skin without flinching. You don't obsess over being understood. You understand yourself. And the people who used to haunt you, the ones whose approval once held you hostage, begin to fade into the background. Not because they changed, but because you did. Their gaze no longer defines you. Their silence no longer wounds you. Because you're no longer performing, you're becoming. This isn't about confidence, it's about clarity. A quiet, grounded knowing that you were never broken, just buried. That you were never too much, just misread. That you were never lost, just waiting for your own permission to come home. You never needed their validation. You needed your own attention. Not applause, not perfection, just presence. What you've been calling loneliness, that's your soul asking you to come home. You thought the pain was about not being seen, but the truth is, you stopped seeing yourself. And then, something shifts. You stop scanning the room for approval. You stop reshaping yourself to be palatable. You stop needing to be chosen, because you already are. By you. You begin to say no without guilt. You stop chasing people who drain you. You lose interest in proving anything. You start acting from your truth, not from your wounds. You no longer wait for permission to exist. You stop apologizing for your intensity, your boundaries, your stillness. There's no sudden explosion, no dramatic rebirth. Just this, a quiet steadiness inside you that no one can touch. A deep breath that finally reaches the bottom of your lungs. A silence that feels like home, not punishment. And you realize you never needed to earn your worth. You just needed to stop giving it away. That's the shift. That's the return. Not louder, not better, just real.